Okay, so before we actually jump into the final drawing, what we need to do is we need to study some of the proportions of the head, right? So basically your biggest shape is the actual head, and then the second biggest shape is the cylinder of the neck, okay? So if you actually were to measure the distance from the back of the head to the front of the face, just with your pencil there, and then you take that measurement and then you move it to the top of the head, you'll see that that measurement is exactly the same as the distance between the top of the head and the bottom of the chin, okay? So what we're dealing with is we've actually got a bit of a square shape going on, as you can see that I've done in this initial sketch. It's a really good idea to start with a small scale sketch in the corner of the page before actually attempting the final drawing. This way you can work out a lot of these problems very quickly. So you can see here I started with a square and then I began to draw the rest of the head inscribed within that square. So when you're drawing portraits or any kind of complicated structure, you are basically working from the largest shapes to the smallest shapes. So I started with the square shape. I thought that was a pretty reliable proportion to begin with. And then I basically added in the cylinder, that is the neck, and then the hair bun at the back here, and then the nose as well, because the nose kind of protrudes outside of that shape there. But any kind of smaller details like that you want to ignore. You really just want to start with a square shape first. Alright, so let's have a look at the main proportions then. So once you've done that step, you want to separate the head from the neck. So you can see like the neck will begin there. And this is the head. And then once you've found that, you want to separate the face from the head. Alright, so that's when you want to start drawing in the jawline. And then you want to start drawing in this silhouette of the shape here of the face. And then once you've found that, then you can begin to look for these smaller proportions here. So you'll notice that the distance from the chin to the base of the nose is equal to the distance between the base of the nose and the eyebrow, which is equal from the eyebrow to the hairline, where the head begins to, where the forehead ends and then the top of the head begins, right on that corner there. So Aphrodite's got a bit of a low hairline. That's just something that you need to take into account. So put these main proportions in first, and then once you've found those, then you can pinpoint the exact location of that hairline afterwards. So now that we've kind of talked about a little bit of the process, we can actually jump into the final drawing. Okay, so first things first, just going to lighten that sketch just to get rid of that. So I'm going to start with the top of the head, figuring out where I want that to sit on the page. And then I'm going to draw the back of the head right here. So that's going to go somewhere around there, just making sure that I'm leaving enough distance to draw the bun of the hair. So that's going to go there. And then the front of the face, I think I'll place probably about here. Okay, so I'm just taking that measurement there. The chin is going to go about there. So there's my square shape mapped in. I'm going to find the center of this I'll just measure with my pencil like that, and like that. So there's the vertical center. Now I want to find the horizontal center as well. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to start sketching, basically just sketching in the head very carefully. So if you have a look at the hair, it's actually more of a spherical shape. I'm just going to kind of carefully sketch that in with broken lines. I don't really care if I'm drawing on top of the sketch, doesn't matter. If we have a look at this side of the square here, that's where the face is going to be. So I can carefully begin drawing that in. And remember that this mark represents the bottom of the chin, right? So that's going to come around here. So the chin's going to kind of curve somewhere around there. And then it's going to slope down that angle. So there's the jawline. So I'm not really measuring too much, I'm just kind of measuring with eye. Just kind of getting a feel for all of these shapes. Okay. And I'm just gonna move the camera on this side. So the neck is going to go about there. You can do a quick measurement on your little sketch to see how many times that fits into the total height. So if I put a line there, compare that. Okay. You can also have a look on your reference as well. So that probably wants to be a little bit lower. So all we're doing at this point is we're just carefully mapping in the silhouette of the figure. So I'm just kind of comparing like where this part of the neck meets the back of the head. I'm comparing that in relation to where it sits with the chin, right? So if I hold my pencil horizontally like that, there's the bottom of the chin there. And you see that notch is just a little bit above it. So if the bottom of the chin is here, then that notch is going to be about there. Which means the hair bun kind of sticks out like that. That's going to go that way. So I'm not trying to rush, but I don't want to be too slow about it either. I want to get these proportions on the page. So So this is about drawing with feeling rather than logic. Because the sooner you get your proportions onto the paper, the sooner you can begin to correct them. And that's really what drawing is about. It's just about correcting the last mistake. So I'm just having a look at the hairline now. And I'm just going to draw a sweeping line that travels in that kind of direction. And again, I can correct that later. I don't need to obsess too much over that. If it needs to be fixed, I can fix it later. Okay, so it's got the back of the head there, we've got the front of the face there. Let's see if we can find, on our reference, the center. Okay, so the center kind of lines up with the ear. So the ear of the figure kind of goes about there. And you'll notice that I'm kind of jumping all over the drawing. I'm not trying to get tunnel visioned into one particular spot. It's really important that you are constantly moving around, standing back and comparing your drawing to your reference. So I want to try and get the nose in there now. So the nose is going to sit probably about there, maybe even a bit higher, and then it's going to protrude out the face like that. That's going to go there. That completes that part. So I'm just kind of drawing this little detail in there now. Okay. So just focus on the big shapes right now. Don't focus too much on proportion as such. And use broken lines. You see how I'm just using like short dashed lines to map my figure in the page? That's what you want to be doing. So right now I'm just kind of refining some of that line work, and I'm really paying close attention to those angles of these short dashed lines, all right? Remember, your drawing doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a one-to-one copy of the reference. So long as it looks like the subject, then it's going to be a successful drawing. Okay. So the chin kind of rounds off at about there. And then I'm kind of just looking, I'm just going to use my pencil like where the mouth is there. You can see that tilt. So that's like a kind of angle that I need to draw on this. I'm just going to kind of map that in very quickly, just with a soft line, like that. Okay. So here's the base of the nose here. Let's just take a measure and see how that's lining up with our drawing. So remember, the distance between the chin and the base of the nose, that fits in to the distance between the chin and the hairline roughly 3 times, according to the classical proportions. So if I go 1, 2, 3, so it's telling me this is where the forehead turns to the top of the head there, and that's about correct. One, 2, 3. Okay, so that's about right. So you know, if you've made any mistakes there, just correct it. Just adjust your measurements. That's kind of where we're looking. So that is the top of the forehead, and her hairline. You know, if we have a look at the smaller sketch, which I've kind of rubbed out, but anyway, you can see her eyebrow is there, top of the forehead is there, and then her actual hairline is a little bit lower than the classical canons, just because she's got more hair, basically. It actually sits right in the middle between the distance of those 2 points, which is about there, which is basically where I had it on here, so that's good. So now that I've found that, what I need to do is I need to start articulating this shape a bit more, okay? So we've got the shape of the neck, we've got the shape of the head, the hair at the back here. Now I've got to kind of make sure that this is sitting correctly, because this is the next big shape. So we're looking for those really big shapes first, making sure they're all in place before we get into the details. So just having a look at the back of the hairline here. And remember, just keep jumping from side to side. Don't just do that. Don't work in a linear fashion. If you make a mark on this side, immediately jump to the other side and, you know, try to connect them in the middle. So I'm having a look at this part. That's kind of going somewhere a little like that. I'm not quite sure. So if you're not certain where anything is lying on the page, just make a really soft mark. Don't make it too dark. Otherwise you're not going to be able to get it out of the page. Okay. And try to simplify these forms a little bit. So, you know, if you have a look on the reference, she's kind of got like this, a lot of grooves, right? A lot of like steps in the hairline. You don't want to draw all those. What you want to do is you just want to kind of like flatten all of those grooves, right? So you're simplifying your reference. You need to simplify your reference so that you can mask those big, or so that you can plot those big masses onto the page very quickly. Let's just clean some of that up. And as I said before, try to leave some broken lines on the page. If you put like a hard, definite line, then it's not very easy to see through that when you want to try to adjust proportions, right? So short dashed lines are the way to go. So I can see there's a bit of a tilt there. See that the hair bun kind of tucks. But there's a bit of a steeper angle. So now that I've got the main parts sort of masked in, or mapped out, I should say, now I can begin to just kind of refine some of those smaller details a little bit. So still working on the silhouette at this stage. Let's just get rid of that. There we go. And it doesn't matter if you're using a photograph as a reference. This process is exactly the same whether you're working from life or from a photo reference. Which is why I love constructive drawing, because it teaches you how to draw properly. It's not about drawing what you see, it's about understanding and knowing how to construct it. Okay, so you're drawing what you know, not what you see. I mean, right now in this part of the drawing stage, I am sort of relying on what I see, just because I want to map those big proportions onto the page quickly. But then once we start drawing some of the smaller forms, you'll notice that I start to construct things a little bit more. So that forehead is kind of pretty smooth. Let's just do that. And the nose kind of probably wants to come out like this. So we have a look at the angle of that nose, compare it to the forehead. It's about parallel. There's the bottom edge of the nose there. And put some distance between yourself and the paper. You know, if you're just, drawing like this, and that's a really shit way to draw, because you're not going to be able to keep on top of everything, okay? You want to really put some distance between yourself and the page so that you can keep in control of what those measurements are doing and what those proportions are doing, okay? So, arm outstretched. Because when I step back, I can see all of the mistakes that I'm making. I can't really do that when my face is rubbing up against the paper like that. Okay. I'm just having a look at that angle there. So this, if you have a look on the reference, I don't know if you can see it on the camera. Okay, you can just see it. If I hold my pencil at the front of the face, you can see that the edge of that lip and the edge of the brow, that actually creates a vertical line. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to drop a vertical like that. Make that a little bit more vertical, maybe. Okay, it's kind of doing that. So now I've got a much better idea of where the edge of the lip needs to be. Okay, so coming back to the classical proportions, right? So got the base of the nose mapped out there on the profile line. That's where the brow is, and here is the curve of the chin. So if I divide this distance and this distance in half, I will find the placement of the bottom lip, like the bottom edge of the bottom lip. That's the classical proportion right there. And if I divide the height of that and the base of the nose into 3 equal parts, more or less, I'm going to find the proportions of the mouth. So I'm just marking it in really softly right now. And I know that the top edge of the lip, if it sits about there, it's going to hit that vertical line, and it's going to fold in. So there's the crease of the mouth, about there. And then there's another angle that travels from that top of the lip to the edge of the chin there. And from there I can find where that bottom lip will be placed, roughly. It's kind of doing that. So now I can just kind of begin refining that chin a little bit more. Okay. Let's try and keep those lines a little bit on the straighter side as well. Okay, so that's basically stage one of the drawing process. So we'll move on to stage two. Okay, so we basically got the silhouette roughly mapped out. And at this point what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of lighten some of my strokes a little bit. Just clean up the drawing, but just keeping all of the essential parts. So, okay, so once we found that, once we've got our basic silhouette and we're kind of happy with it, what we need to do is we need to separate the head from the neck, since they are two very different shapes. So again, you know, looking at the reference, you can see how the jawline kind of connects, almost connects into that notch of the hair there. So we're just kind of going to sketch that in, still using broken lines. I'm also drawing the bottom part of the jawline in there as well. So this is where a little bit of knowledge of human anatomy comes in handy for when you're drawing these shapes. So that form is where the neck kind of inserts into the shoulders. So I'm just kind of marking that with a bit of an elliptical shape. The ear typically falls in line with the nose. So have a look at the reference and just see which height, or the height of the ear is compared to the nose, where that sits. In this reference, it sits just a little bit lower. So we're just going to kind of place a little mark right there. And the top of the ear actually falls in line with the eyebrow usually. So we can't actually see the top of the ear in our reference, but we still have to kind of draw it so that we know the placement of it. So I know her ear would probably do something a little bit like that. So I'm just kind of sketching that in really lightly. I can come and correct that later. Alright, so we basically got like the head here. Now what we want to do is we're going to find the position of the face. And in this reference, it's actually pretty clear to see. You can see the position of the face is everything that's in light. And as soon as that plane changes, that's where the face turns into the head. So you're kind of following that silhouette now. So you're just going to kind of sketch that silhouette in just really softly. It starts there. It's a bit of a plane change here. And we can also see that that shadow kind of falls across the hair like that. And everything behind here is all in shadow. So once you've sketched that in, then what you can do is you can begin to refine some of the proportions of that a little bit. Still keeping those broken lines so that you can easily adjust them for later on. Okay. Alright, so let's actually return to some of these proportions of the face. So you can see in the reference, her head is slightly above our eye line. So she's sitting above us and we're looking up at her. And so what's happening here is the front of the face has a bit of a tilt in perspective. So all of these notches, what you're going to do now is you're going to kind of look at the reference, try and estimate what the angle of that tilt is. And then you're going to draw a line in perspective that travels like that. Same on the nose. So the base of the nose is there, and the perspective is going to do something like that. So these are all traveling to a distant vanishing point. Same with the top lip there, bottom lip there. There's the center of the lip around there. And these lines are going to help you to construct the shape of her face with a little bit more precision. We also know that in classical proportions, the eye line, or the level of the eye, it usually crosses through the center between the bottom of the head and the top of the head. So if I just kind of place a line, let's say there, and if I measure that on the profile line from the chin, it should be equal, that distance should be equal from the eye line to the top of the head. And if I do that on my reference, I can also measure that on my reference too. And yeah, that's about right. I think that angle on the eyebrow is a little bit too steep, so we're just going to kind of come in, just flatten that off a little bit. And here we're still in the phase of just kind of carefully mapping out the proportions. So don't be using like any dark marks at this stage of the drawing. Just use soft lines. Keep using soft lines until you can more correctly locate the position of each part of the face. And just short dashed lines too. And when you're sketching in the smaller parts of the face, like the eyes and the mouth, just try to compare them to where they're sitting on your reference, and compare them to the other parts that you've drawn as well. Because when you can find the big shapes, drawing the smaller shapes is a lot easier. I'm just kind of drawing in the corner of the mouth there. bottom of the lip. Corner of the eye. And you know, I'm still jumping around. You know, 1 second I'm working on the mouth, and the other second I'm working on the lips. So I'm not, you know, I'm really trying to avoid getting tunnel visioned into one particular spot. And the side of the nose usually aligns vertically with the corner of the inside of the eye. That's another proportion that you want to be aware of. Okay, let's actually come back to the nose because I feel like I'm getting a bit distracted by the eyes. So let's try and construct that base of the nose a little bit more. can see that once you've mapped some of the main proportions in there, the smaller details are actually a lot easier to draw, because you can kind of just see where they go. I mean, if you're new to this kind of way of drawing, then it's still going to take a lot of practice to get good at it. So, you know, it's not going to happen overnight. Okay. So what I'm realizing is that the crease of the lip should be a little bit higher. I'm just going to bump that up a little bit. And then I'm going to draw the edge right there in relation to the edge of the nose. So I'm always having a look at my reference just to see where things are lining up. There's the top edge of the lip around there. And it's starting to get there now. You can start to see that there's some forms happening. She's beginning to appear from the page a bit more. And it's pretty ridiculous how fast that happens. You know, when you first start drawing it, it's just a series of like sketchy lines and kind of looks like nothing. And then once you start drawing even just like the basic proportions, it all kind of comes to life. And that's why you don't really want to rush through. You really want to take your time to get those proportions right in the early stages of the drawing. Because if you can get them right, then the rest of the drawing is actually going to be a lot easier. Let's construct that chin a little bit more. So I know that there's a bit of a plane change right there, where the chin kind of curls up like that. And then it kind of, that shadow sort of dips down in the center. So that's basically stage 2 of the drawing process, refining the line work and placing the proportions of the face onto the page.